There's like a delay, but so it might take a few seconds, but
okay.
Everyone else got it?
Yep. Oh. Working on it. Oh, no, I don't want to open it in Google Reader. Whoever wants that. Like, seriously. Okay, sorry. I'm doing that to you.
Anyone not good? Cool. Advantage 1 is naval strategy, maintaining heavy forward presence in the Northeast Asia prevents effective implementation of the CS-21 U.S. Navy strategy on cooperative maritime partnerships out of 14. The Navy comes to new strategy. CS-21 no expected to be so quickly over strategy. CS-21 varied by ASP bonus, development, and software, humanitarian efforts, dismissing the imperative of cooperative maritime partnerships, on cultural like the Navy got addition, refocus on West Coast special war in the Pacific fuels for cultural reposition, recapture World War II glory days, and cyber sucks, draws our fleet of practice controls by reinforcing reticence and navigating regular wars, relegating unconventional challenges, secondary priorities, and constraining security, carrying independence, must recognize our most necessary evidence, alter our operational construct, the Pacific, darling, of defense planners, career budget, and new weapons are being taken at a disproportionate rate, solves nuclear competency, only way to maintain effective command in the seas, cooperative maritime action, solves rising naval challenges, carrier forward presence, tips the bells towards arms race, and Rule 14. CF-21 reflection of reality globalization, nobody grows with this calls for adjusting policy grid and strategies are invoked in adversary adjustment consistent with systemic strategy craft to be executed continuously into it. The global system war of major powers the most disruptive threat trying to depend and give result in the prospects that such will lead to war dependent on how currently will lead to proceed the reason the world has been able to system back because the world wars the US command and the one of the thoughts of the world's practice and before the challenge becomes how to use command and such that naval arms races do not occur that appear to be were sure fire losing started the first of the US who started the arms respecting the Chinese because the threat upon the general reciprocal response and second was for the leading into the level to emerge the new anti-ship missiles the government what was Navy combat powers concept of the carriers taking these out seriously not rescue with or stimulating escalation of the nuclear level the Navy have to disaggregate power and disperse grid be thereby eliminate those vulnerable to deterioration of the deterrence of command of the seas maintained by not provoking the level seas can constitute massive geopolitical shattering from preventing conflicts in one area from spilling over the pray that it's not in every Navy for itself and perhaps the more cooperation the better Navy cooperating can reduce the likelihood of more unchained naval Indian naval rescues nuclear breach tension to attack sentence person arms race heat 15. The Indian Ocean can be safe from conflicts. The India stops thinking of don't be a matter of time before. They know you're shipping of India nukes from land to seek a nation of nuclear combination is mobilizing every rapid case in the Navy Brahmas. Propelled into this clinging dangerous can receive against where institutionalized conflict resolutions can totally have rapidly force Pakistan or rather to acquire capable of negotiating an arms race into back escalation is likely no defense. Homeland's 14. South Asia's most risk of a breakdown is able to be in the face of your security challenges because of proximity history investigates the protection of short range missiles and India's sea-based nukes race concerned about sea and sea the discharge relations intertwined with China that increases death with the shocks each is worrisome of the combination could be directly destabilizing disentangling the carriers, ski shores, and commanded seas, refocusing away from regional deterrence to day-to-day maintenance of the global system. Rule 14, the utility of carriers on global scale makes it evaluating the risk of regional sea control fighting commanded seas at state of passion people better reinforce the composed loss of the feeling to absorb losses without jeopardizing commanded carriers. Best use the exercise commanded spell and wording this course of the fight for the employment must be attended by calculation of acceptable risk carrier. Unique characteristics suggest they should use the exercise command on a day-to-day basis. We should have enough to make the readily available to be in the American interest fight with forces that are hard to handle. Use acceptable risk profiles compatible with the usage and agreement. Some factors described in the tantum for structural deterrence will be enhanced. The issue may not be seize control of the SES to be denied to count less rigorous requirement. Carrier focus is key to change overall U.S. strategy carriers dominant naval policy and cultural overwhelming humanitarian positions. Worse not. CS-21 highlighting the given the Navy's ability to contribute positively to this mission. One might expect officers to see this opportunity to opportunity to hold place in the U.S. Navy's journey. History will need after the U.S. Navy's institute and culture of its slow to be able to respond to carrier to exert overwhelming influence on all aspects of the strategy and policy operation dominated by carrier operation involving multi-layer maintenance, training, qualification, deployment, stability operation, and disposal passage fashion to a dangerous distraction plan. The United States should significantly reduce counter anti-access air denial offensive strike assets in Northeast Asia, including carrier strike groups, to a level consistent with the mutual denial force posture. Advantage 2 is nuclear deterrence. The U.S. is embracing the of deterrence in Northeast Asia now levels, decreasing the role of nuclear weapons as a test case for other regions. Butter 15. The U.S. relied increasingly on non-nuclear elements to strengthen regional security and nuclear conventional presence. Non-nuclear elements take down a greater share of deterrence for this trend. Obama decided to reach the role of nuclear weapons in Asia Pacific. Police highlights the argument that large nuclear guarantees were dominated in the Cold War's Washington attempts to rely more heavily on conventional weaponry. Asia Pacific proved to be a hard test for this new approach. Conventional strike presence signals de-emphasis of nuclear deterrence on about allied assurance in Southeast 14. Conventional options discussing importance of strategic deterrence and how to practice among nuclear pressure right. Graphically against another nuclear power to not adoption has to be dangerously discounted to the legitimizing nuclear deterrence place in the time to stand allies who lack confidence in extended deterrence and no trust that out of time reinfluence your development of arsenal some intended consequences and the raise of the nuclear threshold of demonstrating the intent to fight a full conventional war against seriously underestimating China's capacity. Conventional deterrence is terminally ineffective in Asia Pacific environment only is prioritizing nuclear deterrence reassures allies and deters conflict. 15. The prospects for being able to project power of allies in Asian rapid modernization and expansion testing levels of deterrence to minimizing the roles of nuke China has been building up seated knowledge and knowledge by strategies in the control of absolute time to relying mainly on conventional forces means nuclear weapons are going to have to feature more prominently nuclear weapons projectiles without deploying substantial conventional force conventional members need to be explicit and physically visible. That means more difficult and that becomes more difficult costly depending on your armament, less effort is needed when nuclear weapons are involved. Nation itself is fast with many actors diverting interest in your armament to give bases requiring nuclear weapons to reach your allies and nuclear deterrence and then important for Seoul, Tokyo, and Canberra. New conventional forces do not provide reassurance and speed is not solving underlying problem. Bases are vulnerable to China's missile strikes, increasing the role of nukes is key to restore great power deterrence stability. Conventional deterrence causes modernization, discounting nuclear war. Bradley 15. Deterrence is a psychological function even across the credible deterrence can fail because consequences of restraint are rendered are developed diminishing with lots of nuclear weapons. British against their proposed conventional with the interest of regarding Russia and China linked to the decision of lower emphasis on nuclear. The anti-American expectations of Russian relationship has deteriorated their kind of use of Russian aggression power to let Russia depend on equal force of the conventional conflict. Russian name outside of the first one of the highest priorities. Chinese strategy of successful commitment to concerned about conventional attack to engage in China's strategic return analysts for conventional capabilities are not concerned by the heavy conventional deterrence on by nuclear deterrence causing danger to rely more on nuclear weapons specific act can be conventionally they use conventional strike on the best turns by reinforcing for seven nuclear forces that are vulnerable to the US evidence and strike decision by more conventional ways created a dangerous potential for risk. How to use falling nuclear energy track by assuming that place the same low value on nukes nuclear weapons encourage cooperation because development legally on nuclear deterrence is still the least bad after third nuclear war is not enough unless nurture nuclear deterrence specifically for annexing nuclear deterrence is key to Asians to leave multiple hotspots on the Berkeley 13. Nuclear weapons have been central to alliance and Asian importance is increasing because nuclear extended deterrence credible that there have been efforts to downplay the role of nukes allies expressed efforts to concession for not nuclear features during commercial roles of nukes the central impact scale invasions were pitted to make it possible by nukes outweigh that of different weapons bombs towards solving crises failed Beijing to nuclear weapons resistant for change bombs and Washington back with wilderness risks and states must not stand effect the Beijing direct housing agent balancing natural the home force today there about this and some major hotspots of potential the start of great power companies include Denmark, Kashmir, CSCS, and Taiwan, Korea. These is fertile ground for conflict free concerns led to arguing increasing the role of nuclear weapons playing contributes to regional stability. This is the most probable scenario for nuclear escalation 2014. Asia shows a great threat to global stability. On like Asia has been the most destroying part of the globe. China, Japan, Korea are ruling the arms race escalation move rapidly to large scale nuclear conflict. China's escalation to control the Japan and potentially seek attack by the China back footsteps towards nuclear weapons is difficult so many players and barriers against conflict. Actually, the Northeast Asian arms race is far more dangerous. You often go. You've all incentive to go first. Conventional focus makes nuclear escalation. The U.S. Sino crisis likely flagging. 12. China and the U.S. Both risk on war for working on anticipated escalated nuclear weapons. Seeking quick victory. President conflict strikes by the U.S. security agent was attacking nuclear leave in China. Then it appears to be mighty escalating nuclear weapons. The recent energy of the emphasized role of nukes. The risk of nuclear war life and disorders and third professional conflict. China's strategy is attack for inserted simply in logical use and accusation does not find China's NFU credible. The Chinese special attack is part of retaliation for source. Chinese nuclear assets escalated possible nuclear war will be likely territorial pursuits raising national sentiment to Western political and produce and number costs belly that can trigger conventional conflict getting nuclear war. Chinese modernization in response to conventional threats on immense political support for U.S. Russia arms control hanging about them. 15. In debating the primary is are concerned about the fact that the nuclear force is concerned about conventional munitions affecting balance are increasing the mass issue of arms issue with the moving the Chinese China's posture facing Wilmer additional platforms moved by China to increase that on about U.S. and Russia efforts to pursue further protecting the Chinese nuclear on about political support comes beyond new star China's nuclear may complicate U.S. and Russian planning to either conflict simultaneous nuclear threats collapse of arms control triggers U.S. Russian global conflict not for war production until 14. If arms control maximum U.S. and Russian collapse then the world loses the crucial example of properly interpreted recognized implementation of face practice losing China's communication with the decision makers rely on gas for U.S. Russian successful response to the leadership they failed to recognize and develop the rest of the world long in the future U.S. Russian war on extinction high. There 13. War about the Russian nuclear arsenal to lead the state from nuclear war on I said on unauthorized launch strategies. They president these then the country go out of control and end the nuclear exchange nuclear water is going to be president as a potential risk of Russian for making rather than false indications attack could be mistaken in short of the hospital relations with Shirley in the future increasing nuclear tension solvency.
Go to Metcalf. You have to read Metcalf on the flow.
Oh yeah. The plan ends its shift to new conventional deterrence restores emphasis on nuclear Metcalf. 13. Are the elements coalescing for nuclear competitive armament enough to push the line neutral lots of nukes and new Washington nuclear for reducing the lots of dangers of conventional superiorities of code to Leo Rome deep down security base rest on people to assume will misuse nuclear threats or force expect what you gather result Tokyo and American made efforts add can't get re-emphasizing nuclear deterrence. In Asia, conventional superiority declines relative to the importance of nuclear will rise what Obama and Victor areas like it out. This card or next?
Yeah, you can go on.
Okay.
Next one.
Yeah. Solvency. Moving character groups over the horizon leads to mutual denial balance with 13. Deepening and distress plans and zero sum of the danger regional motivation for Washington wants to address underlying reason for substantial collective correctly in the narrative and market dominance include the ability to operate through the up to the Chinese mainland. These two are increasingly the most important locus of Washington their future on the pending history of robust air and naval presence counters defense balancing would establish genuine balance for mutual denial for Harvard large naval social center pull back to rearward location of westward presence selected in the exact escalation deep strikes of the SBR especially nuclear stability mutual denial improved returns by moving vulnerable assets as the breaches Chinese asymmetric able to would threat time puts into it seeks to make cooperation for about the part fewer with the capabilities to get increased cost perception to hack for groups mutual denial balance reassurance allies for search deterrence and self-preemption pressure shots of 14 China is practical not necessary to limit vulnerability to watch it build needs defensive measure instead of ASB policymakers to recognize dominance as an illusion of are mutually vulnerable to management concern rational faculties and not Chinese dominance from disable deterrence defensive or person mitigates security along the point temperature not threatening to harm China's ability to defend for rather to the attack that's increasing benefits first right being conveying ASB 11 to say symmetry to favor HB over arms and power down HB defensive force China on the wrong side of the capability and cost curve by 5 seconds. Cool.
The new advantage impacts are just China, Asia, and Russia, right?
And they're,
China, Asia, Russia.
yeah, and that Bradley card about like conventional nuclear deterrence globally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Separate.
I just
That's
feel
a
like you
global
skipped it up.
Okay, so the first advantage is about a strategy shift to CS21, which is just like a new naval strategy. The first line of the first card talks about how the naval command has been adrift for 2 decades. Why does the plan change strategy at all if the Navy's
Because
like
it's
entrenched
because
the
pulling
policies?
back the carrier is a major shift away from the focus on conventional warfighting. A big part of that focus on conventional warfighting is deploying the carrier strike group close to China for conventional war.
But see, I understand that you have like evidence that is like carriers are super important, but your own evidence says that the Navy is entrenched in status quo policies, that it doesn't alter posture very capably. Your evidence even says that. One sec. Your evidence even says that like domestic industries and producers want carriers. How do you overcome this?
I think you need to look at the next sentence. So he says, yes, it's been adrift for decades. Then he says, actually, when we came up with CS21 around 2007, 2008, it was going to solve that. But then we started focusing more on conventional war in the Pacific. So he says CS21 creates uniqueness for that argument.
In reference to that line of the card you're citing in the super shrunk down Northwestern text, it then says, well, other criticize its emphasis on naval cooperation in service of avoiding conflict rather than naval readiness.
This author thinks
obviously there are people who think the
I'm
plan
not
is
saying,
a bad idea, but that's like a straw person in the context of
I'm
this
not
card.
saying your evidence is impact turn. I'm saying this own card says there's critics within the Navy who don't want
Yes,
the shift.
obviously that's our uniqueness argument, but the plan is a dramatic shift that forces the Navy to shift away because you can't focus on warfighting with the carrier if the carrier is not where it would be to conventional warfighting.
What evidence do you think you have that conventional deterrence is bad? I'm with you. You have evidence that nuclear deterrence is good.
The Kulaki card says that nuclear escalation becomes more likely when we spotlight our conventional capabilities.
Yeah, I looked up.
Is more usable.
Bradley.
Yeah.
So I'll start with similar and is parallel arguments.
I'll start with Kulaki. This is just the first internal link. The evidence is broadly about sort of different. The first line is, China and the United States are pursuing military strategies and implementing defense policies that could lead to nuclear war.
Yeah,
what does the have to do to solve all of those
because
policy
those
changes?
defense policies, the forward deployment of the carrier strike group and the air-sea battle strategy it implements constitute the strategies that could lead to a nuclear war.
Yeah, let me actually ask about air-sea battle. So in order for it to happen, the United States needs to sort of increase our use of subs, increase our use of UAVs. How does the Navy get these?
Well,
how
so
is it
our
possible?
internal link does not depend on a full complement of everything ASB calls for in the paper. Our internal link cards say that the conventional capabilities we deploy there now, especially the carrier, are enough to trigger Chinese threat perception.
One thing to be clear, like the app is
China-
not about air-sea battle, which, to clarify,
No.
we used to read the air-sea battle app, and this plan is similar, but
Yeah.
the internal link to that advantage
But
is
because-
not about air-sea.
All of your internal link evidence is like China's freaked out by air-sea battle. They're less freaked out by CS21.
But like the plan, because the plan, regardless of whether this is true or not, and we obviously disagree with you on that, the plan takes out the core capability. The whole point of ASB is it revolves around the carrier and being able to get the carrier access to places it otherwise would not be.
Just one other clarification, CS21 wasn't on the China advantage, those are separate advantages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about shift for the first.
Okay, yeah, shit, that's fair, yeah.
Can I take a second to ask you about this? This one done?
What's CS21 strategy?
Like, what is it? It's like,
what do we do?
it prioritizes things like cooperative, like maritime missions, humanitarian missions. We think specifically like the cooperative maritime missions is what the app,
Then you're definitely right.
Yeah.
That's 100% true.
I'm so smart. 942. I don't mind being confident. It's 5 off, and then the first advantage, and then the second advantage.
Let me give it up.
I just sent it.
Oh, and sorry,
And
here.
there's like the 30-second delay because I have a tendency to
Forward
send
it
emails
to him
too
or
early.
the doc chain.
I will do that.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to not get you the one I see. I was
No worries.
just kind of confused where we were in this.
Okay, so can
Yeah, I
I
think
read
I
it now?
misread your email.
lesson.
Yeah,
So
it wasn't bad.
That
I'm
is
sure you're
Game
responsible.
over.
Okay. Is everyone ready? And did you write your something together?
I do.
Okay. First, Hilo Katsubanos pushing and PC's keys top the documents inside trying to learn find administration interest or legal. The administration get a legal coalition to help them in improving the fashion administration continually to court and Democrats upon the favor of Obama. Democrats trying to personally involve and indicate the willingness of lobbying members of Congress for TPP, the plan train PC holds in 1480. Put Johnson on what president established in the White House and defense of the Congress versus their considerable leadership behind the carrier industry and politicians deputy mayor interest behemoths. Commission on our rights, TPP's key to trade leadership and prevent backsliding on trade as well. And 14, there's a fight for global trade and systems of the recession dramatic increase in it. We're continuing policy to make our trade increase and all-time high expense. I appreciate we need a consensus how U.S. is winning. In all TPP, America doesn't pass. America is losing a liberalized global trade system without a protection of the mass flight extinction panzer in a critical trade will inspire temperature responsibility for protection of this person and confrontation such as will give rise to full-scale military and consequently the propagation of frequency and scandal stable rapidly prohibition. China will to increasingly military pressure and every member colonization of Israel. Israel may draw and allies into a global commerce free. Some executive direct police for biological nuclear weapons has the new world will next off his topicality military is forces covered in 3 on the master Heinz presence has placed before or to oversee infrastructure and equipment legally. There's nothing that is countering to access anti-aerial denial military presence. The plan is no different than remove forces that alone China, but that are necessary for deterrence. Totally meaningless gating and 15 pedagogic described at ESB for racial concepts described at A218. There's nothing the concept of not official doctrine. Now, simple hypothesis should generalize based on sufficiently evidence. Symptoms related for step in the doctrine. The ESB remained funded to concentrate over the doctrine, prove technology, or the trade of ESB. ESB is not a strategy, vote negative for limiting expand presence to be meaningless. Vote on and to expand concept that also right now definition of military presence becomes so meaningless by the least of meaningless military presence would apply to virtually any country. Ground only decreases physical presence, guarantees DA grounding and competition. Otherwise, the firms can maintain some level of presence and just in the activity next off is the other top because you're so not significant means that you have to be one of the third Hagen 11 Robin Hood troops. Jobs would be significant not to take an addition to what happened to these means to numbers that the low and significant watch of 33,000 war robust definition significant would be 32,000 followed by another reduction of war. Then a half they only remove a single carrier that's avoiding issue for limits and rather to double whammy huge shot with tiny cases that avoid core arguments making it impossible to negative to compete now. The deterrence and assurance DA carriers are key along with overall sea power, peace, air presence, and crisis and escalation effects, naval conflict security elements and ensure stable shipping even without a war. McCarthy 15 Navy is sea protect globally interested system amounts of support blood credible power to the parts of perception carriers distributed through field. All runs of the carriers use means to be another minimum of 12 most flexible power to use one of the crisis agrees be sent for naval crisis restriction allocation people don't trade movement insurance and limitation of land and shading dangerous general expectation of growing ship defensive analysis regions do not share China and simply needs one of the most powerful power than more powerful than the portion of the US and one of the daily based in Pacific there's been no great power liability because the US and the Navy rules means is the main global trade power because the sea lines are open and vessels on the run they appears to be all nations out of the higher living center what created frequent emergency hundreds of the US and Navy is overwhelmingly might get it down with a competitor who's actually seeking regional hegemon second single adventure that develop of national security policy for to true north to cut to conditions that I gathered before our eyes Asia proliferation goes global nuclear and turns China do I need to symbol of 14 technical cooperation nuclear Russia China Japan South Korea North Korea US is transmitted risk of regional representation for the nuclear preemption nuclear competition will likely be linked to the existence of such a change in Pakistan I run organic nuclear and secretly confidence from its military after being to work counter specialized on nuclear and station Asia accidental nuclear states have a source of protected confidence on reliable measure command and control system especially involving the Russia retaliation or mobile systems that would run technical manufacture resulting on technical authorized on launch by all T intelligence by the concept misinterpreted terminated messaging preemption air power checks extinction towards China blocks off and tell them to be to range of flexibility control of the air and indispensable security global mobility striking by sort of conflicts extended beyond operation along the airline maritime and sea border on the interdependent messages what the allied forces have risk WMDU cyberspace attack research facilitating space by regions are the and global the war the structure concludes North Korea discussing Iran and developing an irregular warfare with independently proliferation nuclear eradication of certain policy and stable effects and lose control of new such by bond North Korea and escalates significant combination of special order and incredible related crisis management. Did I skip a page of this card?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Now, last up is the counterplan tax. The United States should establish a minimum fleet size of 346 commitments to span the carrier fleet to maintain a minimum of 16 at all times. Merchants, minstrels from France extend the carrier wing range, including procurement of deploying long-range aircraft employed, pulsing combat power taxes from carriers fund. The Navy at least to levels recommended by the Secretary Gates 2012 budget submission and military budget sequestration and air sea battle and shift to an active denial strategy, including all necessary implementation measures and capability upgrades. Establish a packing new unilateral reciprocal and informational strategic reassurances to China, including reconnaissance limits, mutual notifications of observation, open skies, INSCA, joint missions limits on new observers, home boarding of carriers, mutual code of conduct for maritime operations, Taiwan assurances, challenges and any air sea battle related modernization, including necessary upgrades to bombers and long range precision strike system. Publicly announced that both conventional and nuclear deterrents are a part of the United States' strategy in Northeast Asia and abroad. That counterplans strategic reassurance solves the plan of the permanent by Chinese perception of resolve and causes U.S. underway the value of cooperation turns both from the case of Halen 13. Strategic reassurance without sufficient which need to demonstrate ability capacity to define the vital interests of all days, necessary to concrete sector, reduce reduce not complicate under complementary purposely reassurance to provide a time to adjust and avoid the hedging that the cooperative reason to hear the conflict demonstrating benefits of collaborative done, where hard conceded competitive limits set object reassurance to quality limits to reception is a proper tool for legally means to touch and restraining may seem, however, the risk of being misreceived is to be the supplement of the country, but necessarily of reinforced the vital to adjunct the virtual cycle of biblical confidence transparency is as well known sources give quick warning such as one open size and observation and exercises in reducing the risk of a breakout increasing price sensibility resulting in important so does not result in from a lack of clarity or susceptible to provide high value only make these sides convinced that it cannot achieve the goals and limited assembly beacons of relationship and example personal limit of how they clearly characterize the U.S. China relationship U.S. military capability that is important to vacate after suggested by did not accept Chinese attempts to drive the U.S. out and all such a misperception they will have the power to incentive the this will your sole policies get a message GDP either disrupted the capacity of such a limited come to reality it's a result of underestimation should China become to the U.S. embracing more solutions policy they might believe that they could prevail in competition similar result of prevail with other weight value of cooperation. This might also have another compromises in cooperation on attracting Beijing in the U.S. limitations will turn deployments Western Pacific active to annihilate ASP crisis escalation boost assurance and security commitments but carriers or keep the plan text credibly effectiveness air power and defensive counter H-1 causes Asia pro of China war and U.S. escalation high month 13. While enhancing the offensively oriented border strategy have been criticized to enable product base to the Indian Ocean, South and East, and the outside of China's fighting capability, establish a number of ways changes, most importantly, an effective advantage offensive in the allies, China, and South Korea, Taiwan, and would like to follow that the Sony U.S. operations that leading leaders are far more likely to practical and preventive destruction, credible U.S. commitments to Asia, states remaining capable of killing the body might be that China sees nuclear weapons to steer for country Japan has held the U.S. not as the U.S. extended deterrence remains credible because discussion no longer stable South Korea had increased interest would almost certainly undermine U.S. extended deterrence for all the serious consideration nuclear weapons return off and have your fatal compromise it's the opportunity for the left to just to active and would fighting for the rights of civilians without the escalation risk counterattack capability enhance the lanes are key to the strategy of define Chinese objectives and maintain the capabilities of repeat China military aggression this is different and maintain the last such a dominance and finding balance as well as making a territory short term mark territory strikes.
Do your analytic and then just go straight down to solvency. It answers everything. The thing about the two advantages.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the new advantage real quick. The first advantage takes us out if the U.S. is focusing on CS-21, then they would emphasize that. Nuclear deterrence process made it clear that their advantage is about shifting to a maritime strategy, which is not nuclear deterrence. They've also read evidence that the U.S. won't emphasize nuclear deterrence, not that we would get rid of our nuclear weapons. Yeah, obviously, the status quo maintains nuclear deterrence. Naval strategy.
Just solvency straight down. Yep.
Circumvention means zero solvency. The plan only moves to Northeast Asia, will move east or southeast. It's like the Southeast Asia ASP inevitably takes out solvency, independent carrier, cut shocking 14 ASP. Definitely defines any future military engagement Southeast Asia based on naval power. Then the plan sequencing dooms their transition Japan consultation allies assurances alternate subsidies with sub-18 sites for Chinese mutual diplomacy agreements and time-consuming regional forces reversal deals are vital prerequisites swaying in 15 alliance on visibility would involve the change of posture state of the political arrangements as approach would and tell the substantial revision carrier groups the U.S. for the personal presence of conditions include prior assurances reliance on rapid content and several strategy would the difficult process engaging with the strategy would engage the difficult process of norms would be less Japan need to provide alternative bases especially for submarines for this reversal strategy would place an emphasis on regional wide assurances it's required long-term political and diplomatic transition would and another area of security agreements perceptions of threat accelerate Asia arms raise it undermine the positive sign relationship with the palm pro backwards other such as a result it would tell high level uncertainty north to turn to heat space of China would training the options technologies are mature and lesser diplomacy perception is the U.S. is undergoing decline in bold another in holding nationalists, market nationalists, and force structure shift to effective dispersal forces filling and assumed by their evidence takes second comfort. In 13, the revolutionary departure is planetary MC powder that includes submarines, missiles, vessels, androids, CS4, ISR, cyber. This is not to say that carriers have no future. The suffer such as expresses views commitment interest or which are if you throw capabilities are not suitable at the key issue. The balance Navy is not going to shift the way the carriers commanders diplomats have. The politicians and the builders they remain critical to power within the countries of the U.S. funding retention will limit distributed sea power will also take the U.S. decades in addition to huge structural impediments because Carrier will continue to be and use its leadership for one region sea power spending global navies the U.S. needs a long time to give an version of London following whether institutional caution. Market caution.
Status of the counterplan?
The status quo is a logical option. It's all one counter plan except for after the line the counter plan that emphasizes nuclear deterrence.
Is anything not a net benefit?
Politics.
Politics is not a net benefit.
So first key violation, what do you think the violation is, given that we fiat that the carrier strike group gets removed and your violation card describes a term not included in the plan text?
The affirmative does say counter anti-access air.
No, your card is about air-sea battle and its lack of definition.
It then
not-
says A2AD.
Yes, which is different from counter H2AD. That's fine. Where is the Perilif claim in your McGrath card? That's supposed to be your link to assurance.
No, all the counterplan stuff's also linked
Yeah,
to
the
these.
Oh,
counter,
gotcha. Okay.
the
Yeah,
counter
yeah.
plan is all of
Okay.
that.
Where do you think the let's see. So yeah, this McGrath card as a link to the carrier, where does it claim that the existence of the carrier is insufficient? Where does it make any claim about where it needs to be?
Again, all that's on the counterplan.
Okay.
It indicates
Okay,
that symbolism and prompt.
But it also
Yeah,
says
got
that peacetime foreign naval
Can I
presence
ask-
assures allies, deters,
can I
and
ask a
keeps global trade
clarification
moving. The
question?
affirmative removes
Right,
that.
there's obviously some.
I would ask
presence
a really important clarification question. Which
Forward
card
naval
on the
presence.
counter plan, Tyler, did you think, was it O'Hanlon that says it needs to be Northeast Asia?
I think the
Our O'Hanlon evidence is phenomenal, as well as the other.
Yeah.
the Hagenbaum card, which is your solvency advocate, is way better.
Okay.
It's not ourselves, yeah, but-
The
no, it is.
What is
It's
no, this is
It's
important.
definitely the card you got on advantage
Where
too.
what does the carrier do in an active denial strategy?
Our argument is that we shift mostly to pulsing power is what active denial includes. That we're gonna.
What does that mean?
I'm trying to
Okay.
get there.
It's basically like
All these dudes won't let me talk. It's just that the U.S. basically we sort of skirt right outside where China's missiles are able to get right outside of that strategy, but it's still in Northeast Asia, so
Okay.
the perm isn't competitive. And
Okay,
we,
where is
whenever
that
there's
base?
an
Is it at Yokosuka, or do you think there's somewhere else we could put it? Like, where
Like,
does the carrier lurk around?
we think
the ocean, like it's like there's a
It
whole
just
sea.
stays out in the ocean all the
That's
time.
No, but we think home port at Yokosuka is good.
Okay.
Yeah, home
okay.
porting there is
right.
fine, but the argument is, do you want me to continue to explain pulsing power?
I just wanted to make sure you weren't like. Okay, I just wanted to establish it was at Yokosuka. Where do you think a carrier would be ported in Southeast Asia for your circumvention argument?
We got like tons of stuff there. Like
No, we
Philippines,
don't have a carrier port.
but
We have like agreements to base a few troops there for like the army or the Marines in the Philippines, but not a
our
carrier port.
evidence says that the U.S. would be able to move there. I don't remember the exact name of the base, but
I mean,
our
let's be
evidence
clear,
also
this
speaks
evidence
broadly.
is one line. It does not talk about the
I
carrier.
mean, it's
so.
better than any of your evidence.
Oh,
It
that's
also speaks
obviously
to the.
not true.
We've also read broader evidence that speaks to the mode of the United States, which means that
No,
even
but
if
you
there
don't
isn't
have
a
a
physical
place
asset
that you
there,
can put it.
excuse me, please stop interrupting me. Which means that even if there isn't a physical asset there, that the U.S. would want to build those things, and we have strong relations with countries like the Philippines,
You
so they would
like
obviously
this,
like the
okay.
United States.
Okay, we'll take that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just coming soon.
Here's your podium deck.
Thanks.
That doesn't really help you, but.
Please.
This is just true.
Yeah.
It just is true.
Yeah, no.
Like I can read impact key cards if you really want.
No,
but
yeah.
I'm just right.
That's
What?
You want me to type it somewhere?
Yeah, sure, at the top.
you know what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean?
Well, I'm just gonna say that. I might read a card or two.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna read.
Well, did it kick back? Or
Yeah.
Okay, so.
I was hoping
Oh,
someone was
instead
just
of 1-5,
randomly
instead of
giving all these
1-5.
signals.
Apparently, Connor said like they had that happen to them in like a framework debate last year.
Oh.
And you got like a hilarious.
And like I got a response like 2 months after the NDP from the person. Like it was something bizarre. Like I already knew all these things, but like why are they all highlighted?
That's
something.
hilarious.
Did they vote A for neg?
I don't know. They like only got the one in our doc or something.
You're just like, what is this? Okay, orders naval strategy.
I already know.
Sorry.
Hold on. Okay, naval strategy.
Yeah, naval strategy. Nuclear deterrence. T presence. T significant.
What was the case order?
Sorry, it's naval strategy.
Got it.
Then
Yep,
nuclear
yep.
deterrence. Then politics, the counterplan deterrence. Sorry, I kind of messed up the order there in my speech doc. I'm going to do the counterplan and then politics and then
Okay.
deterrence.
Where was?
Do you
Do
care
you
if
mind if I just change it in the doc?
Yeah, please. Go for it. T is uppercase. T presence, T significant.
Got it.
Yeah, so it goes T presence, T significant, China counterplan, politics, assurance.
Sweet.
Hold on, I'm gonna change one too.
Should I move?
So counterplan.
I won't ask about that.
Yeah, the little F5 China counterplan header should be. Okay. No circumvention theorem says we move to Southeast Asia. Yokosuka is the only place we can dock out with WCT-19. Yokosuka is the only dock capable of maintaining aircraft here in Air West Hawaii all the way to the coast of East Africa. There's no political willpower to base in Southeast Asia. Clinger and 12 carrier group is homeboard. Yokosuka ideally you over-encompass the carrier circuit half the Southeast Asian political balance to make it unlikely that such force would be allowed to roll basically the nation there, including all so they say slow transitions are relevant to solvency. The plan immediately resolves the reasons why offensive source is bad. No part other evidence says we couldn't immediately implement things like mining anti-ship missiles or any of the defensive capabilities that prevent China from seizing territory. The reference to long run is about a long run way of ways we have to sustain it, not how long it initially takes. The arms race warrants are contingent on winning an assurance link, which are other advantage straight turns. Now they say no force structure shift. Yes, the plan calls it a shift to mutual power. Swaying evidence indicates that often offensive capabilities would shift to more defensive capabilities and a focus on nuclear deterrence. The DoD is actively exploring the concept now, which means it calls the transition to 15 defensive thinkers are great promising about efforts to civil immersion and interest in use of small detachment without enemy planes to ships. A growing number of scientists call or box contracts area capabilities. The DoD is the first time which determined by now change the classification feature. Chinese territory organs mark their cardiac grabs now the second advantage. They have literally dropped this advantage, which means that global nuclear war through the collapse of deterrence, specifically Asia war, is inevitable, and the rollback of START in U.S.-Russia war are all inevitable. Their only argues that the first advantage takes it down. No, it does not, because because the transition from conventional deterrence to nuclear deterrence, CS-21 is not a deterrence strategy. They jive together pretty well, because yes, once the Navy stops having to focus on the conventional mission, that's why they do more things like cooperative maritime missions, but certainly that's not a deterrence mission T. We need the plan removes forces. It just defines which assets are removed based on the missions they perform. At the very least, remove the carrier striker, which proves words to reject the execution of T parts of the plan default to after interpretation of the plan text. They didn't read a violation card about the term of the plan. Counter A2AD means forces associated with the ASB, HA15, ASB posted to break through A2AD, creating integrate force usable to attack targets and definite attacks as part of ASB as President's way to counter A2AD. That includes the defined list of forces. Layer 13 associated with ASB and substance are in individual presence. The objectives of being forces which can be deployed to strike Chinese assets, position, strike the air, ground, and do with the means such as the carrier, battle group, counter interpretation, military presence means forces and assets. GO1, you define presence forces, aim sections to conduct military operations. Military presence should be described based on mission, key to education, competency. 2, military presence consists of assets and assets made of engagement, presence, activities the U.S. uses to promote military objectives. It increases after net ground because allows us to discuss about strategy, not simply about capabilities, reasonable, delve beyond the flow. T significant. We need carrier striker with significant, has 75,000 personnel, U.S. like number the carrier striker is composed of 7,500 personnel carrier, 116 destroyers, and 70 aircraft. The largest operation of the Navy covers the principal element U.S. power particularly counter interdiction is significant, means at least 1,000 troops. We meet U.S. Armed Services Command 15, a significant reduction is fine. As less than 1,000 more troops, a 20% reduction. Troops counter interdiction significant means important cost 15 actually important ASP means that is required to above preferred ground quality of significant reductions by better links to core. Generic links like assurance significantly is defined numerically absent an A. The actual size of pressure has little bearing determined remains significant. In fact, the environment is arbitrarily scholarly consists of what significant decreases, allows self-serving definitions, signifies a negative for bad, procedurals creates bad faith. They win the quantitative definitions are good, then 1,000 is better, reasonably they don't want to rise to a limited top where the ground lose teammates are bad for substance politics. TPP fails doesn't address mercantilism or solitary debate. 14 advocates convince themselves of mercantilism is wrong. 3 tiers of practicing mercantilism, enabling trade, currency, inflation, massive South Korea, Japan, Singapore, 12, the W operations, big Georgia, global trade, term reduction, replacement, consumption tax, and border state, the rise of modern industrial subsidization. Oh, sorry, I went on border. TPP cheerleaders, push deals, well, the rest of modern mercantilism and no impact to trade, cash, and intending signal trade brings peace, remains weak and inconsistent regardless of the model. The signal that produced a trade ceremony consistent results all yield an important factor of topic of trading inside the North is guaranteed to here's the subject taxes such as trading states. What we know is that means trade liberal claim regarding the effective trade on topics that are not robust. Laundry list of pounders, Phillips 11, 12 is moved quickly number of issues. Wrong with the division, starts closing Guantanamo, covering client that doesn't mean crossing themselves going to be easy. Shouting Guantanamo, Republicans say how about the president's playing a final scene over the Congress shopping and this week trying but Trump are fighting Republicans over constitutional powers and budget fights are soon in massive fields. And 11, 12 Republicans won't back down from the fight over the budget despite words to suppress the budget. Second of the bond ensures that the government will shut down the Congress line to assign money by December to 11. The next fight will be over how to implement the deal. Republicans attach conservative provisions that reject the bill. Republicans are not worried about a competition. TPP won't pass. PC fails. Dennis 11, 12. The next Obama's Pat Clinton, Trump, Labor Unions, tobacco savings, what his choices, the UN's gas is real, gone through tough studying, decide focal press from the White House, huge hurdles, Clinton, the agreement, her opposition makes it tough self-limit, saying because whoever's winning, but votes are taking impacts out from all, saying that the trade back makes it harder for Republicans to support the deal. Allows countries to zip tobacco and result the trade deals already left Hills and Burr, that he hopes the TPP to said TPP may need to be renegotiated, mark that card, renegotiated, and, it says distance on intrinsic law should possibly has the ability to pass the plan, and there TPP it's not operating cost fear, commercial strike causes China to adopt launch a warning posture Committee, and 14 China's focus modernization as viable instructor sex on its law adoption launch a warning as normally such a change be adopted would be no increase use commercial first strike belief that causes nuclear war. Chapter 15 launch warning introduces great race of also complete unlimited war with new structures on the way to leadership 15 minutes notes can be not hesitant to fresh no guarantee wrong decisions will be China slow making boards made that higher load this can increase of its acting stall or unfight launches. Normal means is the plan will be an internal due to policy change doesn't link college in 15 civilian space information associated with the military. They don't know as much knowledge so with the automatic dismissed trying to interrogate decisions political leaders loads and spend time political company as much as Charlie Mulder sources with regard to weapons and doctrines. Sorry about the order. China. Counter. This counterclaim solves absolutely none of this version of the app. This is all designed to answer an old version. First, it does not solve CS21. Our two interlinks are first, a cultural trade-off that the Navy needs to stop focusing on the conventional deterrence mission to focus more on maritime cooperation. And second, that we need to decrease the perception of strong, visible U.S. conventional presence to stall for naval arms race, and they can see that those will escalate cause things like Indo-Pacific and nuclear war and extinction. The counterclaim doubles down on this form of naval dominance, which means it leads more. Second, they obviously lead to conventional deterrence as well, again, because they double down on that their link author votes affirmative says voluntary carrier reduction doesn't link O'Hanlon in 13.1. The author will consider see China cut by natural ability, but the cost American concessions will be worse negotiating restrictions U.S. carrier United States interest in formal arms control, maybe percent formal negotiations drug no formal deal appears with support the United States for build-ups. ASB owns question China's minds about whether the U.S. objectives to deliver or primitive knockout such capacity in place dangerous crisis splitting reinforcing arms race. They cannot solve for a conventional shift or a mad and Adams evidence indicates that as long as we have conventional presence in the region, allies will think it's credible. They'll always think we will choose the conventional mission cancel nuclear deterrence comp plan. It makes nukes seem like a last resort, makes it not credible. Going 14 nukes, but the claim an armed conflict allies strongly since the U.S. willingness to prepare to use rights of war that extended deterrence about rational complaint limited nuclear wars for Britain war in the first place. Nuclear deterrence is but problem effectiveness and nuclear capabilities are credible. Possibly nuclear sexual incentives for certainly use some credible any source here for worst deterrent effects. So seriously, reduce the rational women since the record the United States will actually use them in China watches assets, not doctrine, WPW, and 13 AC represents that capability should have Christ rights, passion versus Hong Kong, because each gives invasion, first mover, all living nights, South French, targets, and Chinese super targets, will depend on capabilities rather than same strategy, under AC connects capabilities, launch targets, Chinese targets, it could, so last mission across the nuclear threshold, cleared or policy bills, Holic and 9, peace, rods, and tail strong, people feel about nuclear cleared or policy, and power comes up with the world's control, so interest, space, so commitment, last fighting force, passing in our rights, own orders, clear, and goes with something more than reputation stands, behind them, CBMs fail, Solomon 13, CBMs can be the only exception negotiated with our side leads as sex motivation on those sides, greedy focus, competition, China's reluctance to negotiate brutally, opposition, mitigation, it's consistent with the spiritual culture of the neighbors, ruling crisis and swaying, attain objectives, maybe the start to time diplomacy and incentivize desire for CBMs of any kind. Yeah, all the other plans don't matter because they're designed to answer an old version of the app. Definitely have nothing to do with any of these. New advantage, or design. Our new conventional deterrence advantage, it means conventional deterrence is the worst for deterrence and insurance aids when it fails to Asia Pacific, China's anti-access air denial, long maritime distances, and rolling conventional access means it's useless, that's lead these points, escapatory, and causes first lead pressure because China thinks it undermines its secondary capability, that's collectively sees what nuke solves, they have a large magnitude, which means they encourage compromise rally, but only if they are sailing D's to point Japan, South Korea, and Australia all have said they think that nukes are more important than conventional, they want us to shift towards that, that's Lee and Bradley, the only ones with imperative, having stable power stacked inevitably, Talent 15, we have 2 Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Navy, and UMass, government still serving the Navy's forces, the U.S. cannot present with ships that also have the U.S. needs 600 ships in the Western Pacific. The naval scope of the edges running absolutely minimum necessary 350. The shipments 270. And it's a decline, North Dakota decline, no impact, allied pro fleet, and 14 proliferation, not only destabilizing Japan, South Korea, and Australia, and Taiwan are talking about to save stable political regimes, government leaders are accountable. They all have a history of missiles with each other. Allies will be responsible for nuclear weapons states. Assurance low now because of decreased role of nuclear weapons in Turo, and 14 North Korea's nuclear developments along with trimerization are creating unconscious allies. The United States opposite support touch the Korean policy, and then Japan, South Korea are reassured they were reduction roles in nuclear weapons and U.S. strategy station because there are no links to their overall air power impact because it is what the carrier in other areas. Nuclear deterrence is more important ally sphere, and 13 tries to go first to serious complicated relations today. I always look to America to bad nuclear deterrence, China's fix and nuclear conventional capabilities won't concern them nuclear weapons in Asia. We have growing importance. Conventional deterrence fails, not credible, only encourages arm racing, mostly, and 15 value conventional deterrence, reassurance, compulsory, marines, marketable conventional is less credible, certainty, which was released energy drastically, if it's some light calculations, everything conventional should be considered relative progress. Maybe offset advantages will be short-lived, nukes will be preferred. These with deterrence because they contradict the wars and found no conventional capabilities, that's the different conventional, credibly, conventional phase, not strong conventional deterrence, resources, strong political drawing, and sensible and easy use for simple, by Libya or Syria, out of particular solution by truly frame involvement in a regional crisis carriers are net negative for deterrence, rule 2, 1, regardless, ship defenses begun, engaging naval combat, no losses more, power 2, involves the great percentage of power, its losses put out, and overhead cost per offensive power, and single unit starts so much, and this is the carrier is capable, but it cannot tolerate risk. Mark that card, risk.
Do you have any evidence that the plan causes a shift to nuclear deterrence? You have evidence about conventional deterrence in the region is bad? What evidence?
Yeah, the Metcalf card, the one I see, is fantastic that if we lost our conventional dominance in the region, even if Obama doesn't want to, he would have to increase the role of nuclear weapons.
What card is, where is this?
Metcalf, it's it was the last card we read, nuclear deterrence, MEDCALF. That Adams evidence also indicates that regardless of that
But the plan, okay, fact, post-plan, we still have a lot of conventional capabilities in the region, right? Like all our Marines and
well,
now
so,
are there, the rest of our
yeah.
European presence is there,
Few
we're
things.
still in South
Few
Korea.
things. One, you made a claim on the DA that the carrier is the backbone of our conventional deterrence.
Okay,
in the region,
maybe.
Which
okay.
notice, we did not, question that, yes, the carrier is associated with deterrence.
I would like.
And conventional deterrence, basically.
We have read evidence that the plan collapses our allies' perception of conventional deterrence.
Yes.
What evidence do you have that the plan decreases Obama's perception of conventional
that
deterrence
Metcalf
in the
card
region?
is on point on that
Could you
question.
just, I don't mean to be that gal, but could you read me a line or two?
Yeah, sure thing.
I don't see the words like ASB, I don't see carrier.
Well, again, it's not the ASBF. Our elements
I
are
don't
listing
see
for a
carrier,
nuclear
I don't
pivot.
see H2AD.
Oh, no. So, deep down, Korean Asia rests on capability and presumed willingness to use nuclear threats or force. Blah, blah, blah. If conventional spirit in Asia declines, relative importance of nukes will rise, whether Obama and visionaries like it or
I'm
not.
asking the question, what evidence says that the plan causes the perception of Obama's lack of conventional
Are you
deterrence?
serious? If he saw the carrier was not in East Asia anymore, he would probably notice that changed our
Because the
conventional
28,500 troops we have in South Korea that
Yeah,
are
those
on North
aren't-
Korea and
those
China's
aren't-
borders not sufficient.
No,
the Marines
because-
we have that
so,
do
for
have
example,
Marines.
okay, here's a very good reason why it's key.
Which
A lot
is-
of here's a really good reason. All those ground troops in South Korea, for example, South Korea ground troops cannot do anything in the context of things like SCS and ECS disputes.
What about the
Currently,
BMD we have in the region?
BMD
It's not an
is
offensive
in
And
That's
our
not
Marines
excellent.
do SCS and ECS dispute resolution, so I don't know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
that is
You don't
not
even have any evidence on that question.
Yeah,
but
also the
I'd like
Adams
to
card that
ask
I read
about
definitely
the.
ties-
I had a flowing issue on the counter plan.
Yeah.
You read the Colby card. Did you then say something before you said CBMs fail?
Sorry, let me. Colby, and then I read WPW and Pollock. And then I said
WPW. Okay, wait. Colby, WPW,
Pollock.
Pollock,
And then
CDM. So yeah, I
Yes.
thought I missed a card or two. I wasn't sure. Now your Gassiametti evidence says that China fears a conventional strike and that causes them to do launch on warning. What evidence do you have that says that the plan's sufficient to resolve China's fears of a conventional strike?
the carrier just like factually is the asset we would use
What
to
about our
conventionally
BMD
strike
in the
China.
region?
BMD can't be used to conventionally strike China. Like it can't, because BMD is missile defense, so
But-
it shoots down a missile. It doesn't first strike China's missile.
But you know, like China like fears it does, right?
They do not that BMD is gonna attack their missiles in the ground. They know that that's not what it is. You're right. It's 550. That is from this round, correct?
Oh yeah, but I forgot we took that time.
Okay.
So 5:53, I think, right?
Sure. Stop.
7 seconds.
I
Yeah,
get
yeah.
It's a lot of math.
Yeah.
What did you start at?
I started at 9.
But we had 942.
Or I started at 10.
So whatever you had minus 18.
That's that, right? I think that's 550. Yeah.
I just don't know what you said yet.
I'll trust it.
You know, people don't know how math.
Are you a math major? Okay,
It's horrible. I hate my life.
Oh no, I wish I did. I'm about to graduate without having taken a single college math class, and I'm like realizing how much that is just.
Do you plan on going to grad school?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't take math class.
I'll probably
Have
go
you
to
taken a
business
stats
school.
class at it?
Yes. I'm an econ major.
Stats is sort of math. Like
Yeah, I'm an econ major. I just haven't like.
Oh, you're an econ major that can't do math?
Where's
It's okay, I'm a
I
math
mostly
major that
take
can't do
classes
math.
like. I
You
mostly
didn't take like linear algebra. I guess I don't know if
You
need
only
that
have
for
to
econ
take.
at
It's
all.
just Calc BC. So if you
Okay.
have it, you don't have to do
Fair
it
enough.
anymore.
Linear algebra is the
actually don't think it's that quick.
abstract's where it's at.
You think time's linear?
Which is the cumulates.
It's gonna be naval strategy advantage, politics, deterrence. Yeah.
Wait. Did you say politics then the turns again?
Yep.
Okay.
Alright, politics first,
Yes, sir.
and the turns to 7. And
Sorry, I think I misspoke. It's naval strategy, which was the first advantage, politics, then deterrence.
hold on. Okay.
We good? Cool. I know we didn't spend much of that time on my case, but literally there is no shift. That was the entire thesis of cross-like circumvention. Takes out the entirety of the affirmative. It's not about carriers being moved. It's that there's no strategy. Change in the first place. Impact zero solvency. Vote negative on presumption. No evidence distinguishes a location of threat is important for China or carriers or can threaten all of China. It's not just carrier shift containment. Strategy and conventional deterrence strategy is inevitable in Southeast Asia. It's happening now. It takes out the affirmative. Sufficient thresholds are determined by the warrants of their internal link evidence. Not random lines and solvency cards. So it's likely we conceded the core motive. All their evidence says the U.S. is highly invested in encirclement. They'll find a way around the law. No, yes, it's likely South. East Asia's focus on in 14 a moment senior official signal on the U.S. commitment to the frequent of Southeast Asia. First ever deployment of military situation has been implemented until GECB is being actively deployed. They'll stick to all the strategies that have been articulated. No, it's a prerequisite for F solvency. There are authors agree spending 15 civilians transitioning from towards a more stable balance of power and the resources required difficult to achieve. Will require a variety of mechanisms, high level strategic restraint. The real line prompt chance willingness to accept the military position while it's maritime periphery to reduce the conflict estimation will need to reach reliable understanding to reach the ECS and SES and non-Chinese military activities in the first island. Such an understanding certainly involve neutralization of these areas as a location of which the objective is power to create a de facto buffers on along China's maritime periphery. Only these most will provide the strategic assurance required regarding GCS and SES to make clear that it has little direct interest among the disputants. Their own evidence, all inserted into the record and conceded their WCT evidence proves the link to the deterrence disad in the portions of Blue Highland. Talks about how Yokosuka is the key location with power projection. Because I'm not going further, this is carriers inevitable with strategy inevitable. You have not answered any of the circumvention arguments. So the sequencing stuff, top level, is the plan dreams the transition. The reason why I'm doing solvency first is because you should view all of their turns and conventional versus nuclear deterrence arguments on the disad through a lens of shift. If there's no shift, they don't have any link, internal link answers to the disad, and it is literally try or die for the negative. The 1 and C Swain evidence indicates that even if their strategy is good, proper sequencing is key, and they do it prior consultation, allied assurances, sub-basing, Chinese mutual diplomacy, military use of EEZ, regional access, all are super time-consuming, super expensive, and are impossible to solve because they're prerequisite. It also requires increased Japanese actions in these cases because they're responsible for air operations, sea operations, and ISR capabilities. Those are extremely costly and politically difficult. The key determinant of success is sequencing. It means the plan can't reassure anyone. It emboldens nationalism and aggression. It signals withdrawal, collapses regional credibility and security assurance. That's especially true for carrier withdrawal because it talks about how it doesn't convey the physical or psychological presence of the carriers. I'll finish this swing card here. Such undermining efforts to balance Washington would have to deal with operational limits, making military off limits would create missiles to threaten the Japan Japan. This could aggravate Japanese fears of low visibility platforms such as submarines or drones. Would not convey physical or psychological presence of carriers who shift forward. Force Japan to assume greater responsibility. Highly challenging tests ISR could route troops line for left challenging sequencing and constellation in the U.S. would be confronted establishing facilities deployment and range of software until deploy years of diplomacy and extensive data inducements with using politics strategies dependent on effective efforts to reduce trust such require accommodation. This proves extremely challenging. The last argument, no fleet shift or Gomford evidence is better than first line. So there's stuff they say immediate is sufficient to solve. It's not about perception. You said it was about mission shift and deterrent strategy shift. You don't literally solve it. Is long term because of all the capabilities that I already explained. Now no full fleet shift. First, it's a massive departure from current forces. It requires huge and costly upgrades to sub, missiles, drones, aircrafts, and C4 ISR upgrades. Even with immediate implementation, it would take decades. They've also conceded there's no political will in terms of the politics links for the shift. The military and shipbuilders fiercely oppose removing carriers from a single region. Don't change because we have a global Navy who cares about global things. Regional carriers signal U.S. commitment and advance U.S. interest through peacetime presence. Gomford impacts it and says that doing the plan before effective force structure fill-in collapses, assurances, and triggers all this stuff. I'll finish this card too. Or lifetime Navy's very small. This can be illustrated by the percentages. There has been no change. Even if the ignoring characteristics the U.S. must render Chinese targeting effective near term could become critical. Sino-American relations injured uncertainty. Chinese advantages could unsettle. States encourage the Chinese risking creative appearances. Chinese power comes at the expense of U.S. East Asia is too important for withdrawing U.S. power. Also, their evidence says this. I'll insert the Rupert evidence into the record. The blue highlighting is us. I talked about it in the cross-sects of the 1 and see more evidence. No shift. Gomford in 13. There's been modernization but no change in structure. Mission please has not been budgeted despite the threats to Star Service warship. The share has increased. Manufacturers plan regulations. Navy changes as a near imperceptible pace despite changes in the world. Improvement requires stability under characteristic of sea powers. Also, no spending or force shift. There's a massive political commitment. Holston 14 Navy limit operations by putting tricky dollars in one by asking the establishment, White House, and defense and Congress persist. There is interest in the carrier industry. Politicians have deeper interest, but now have accompanied us on our rise. The Davis evidence is also proving that it's generally solved. Your evidence was marked way too soon, and you're going to have to finish it. Even if it's true, it doesn't change the political calculations. Politics. Not going for because TPP is not key to trade, but I'll answer all the trade impacts. I'll explain why in a second. Trade is key to damn global conflict. One side of the world has become more peaceful place. The number of conflicts has been in decline. The death toll has been falling. Expanding trade appears to be playing a major role. Growing commercial ties have a dampening effect on the armed conflict trade. Reinforced democracies and not to pick fights with each other. There is road economic integration as economies and intertwined. The nations have more to lose war. These rupture trade ties that impose lots of damages. Globalization has dramatically increased rates. The economic cost of economic freedom distinctly decreases the probability a country will experience a military dispute with another. Free trade allows nations to acquire wealth through production and exchange rather than conquest. People need resources they can acquire them peacefully. Deep trade ties make war less attractive. East Asia extensive economic ties helping to keep the peace more open. Economic model in Latin America has been accompanied by the dying out of interstate and intrastate conflict. Also, history proves Griswold 98. History demonstrates that peaceful trade the peaceful trade relative peace from 1815 to 1914 was marked by expansion of trade protections in the 30s. Great hostilities propelled Germany and Japan to war since World War II wars have been fought between nations outwardly oriented in trade policies. Now, the assurances this had overview, top level trade outweighs. It was literally conceded. You conceded that carriers are key to peacetime presence. It signals credibility and allows vital conditions like free navigation. The most accurate genealogy of naval presence says since 1945 it says U.S. presence is a key variable. All this was on the counterplan. I just didn't read another impact because we had the protectionism impact about trade. The general trade solves war steps irrelevant because it's about tit-for-tat protectionism, which triggers the impact. Now, trade turns Age of War, Oslo, and when depression trades war can follow. Nothing is that true that Asia most heavily armed region riven with hatreds and rivalries, collapse in trade lead to political tension, international operates distrust, and military miscalculation was held to the peace in this region. Phenomenal growth has turned attention toward Asian infrastructure may not resist the slide towards conflict. It would almost really drag America into it. Independently, East Asia proliferation outweighs and turns the case. They almost all their answers about deterrence and not assurance. I'm not going for the deterrence arguments. They've conceded the internal link that Asia and not just Japan build up. They've also conceded that if Japan nuclearizes, it causes extinction, 100% risk of the impact. They cause unrestrained proliferation with escalating arms races that go global and nuclear accesses. China, Japan, Korea, Russia, and the U.S. Magnitude first with irreversibility and super fast Brumfield. Inform Japan has a nuclear program that's produced substance plutonium. They consider Japan a future away from nuclear, but most think that it could get a bomb in a number of days. Also, it turns the case. Carrier signal without resolve without being escalatory. They make conflict more likely because of escalation. Blatchford 13. The critics would have long-range forces and bombers, but relying on these would limit the response to the crisis and increase in challenges of escalation. Carriers show willingness to use force without escalating. There will always be a need for rapidly deployable forces that can offer flexibility and power projection, which only carriers can provide. Conflict obviously turns all their peacetime scenarios. Now, the conventional deterrence stuff. I'm not going for the deterrence stuff. Deterrence is different than assurance, and that's a question of perception. It's not about preventing Chinese conflicts in the first place. Also, you've conceded an air power impact. Our false graph evidence indicates carriers are key to having planes that are able to be more capable of causing extinction, turns any Chinese impacts, which is important. Now, nuclear deterrence alone fails. Robertson 13, the comprehensive approach to extended deterrence embeds nuclear strategy in large political contracts opposed to nuclear alone. The threat may not always be credible. Some may convince itself that there are forms beneath the U.S. social. This could be a miscalculation, but highlights the value of supplemental elements. Non-nuclear components offer deterrence benefits at EMD, mitigating decoupling by eliminating the risk. These benefits reduce the role of nuclear weapons, regional deterrence architectures. The U.S. checks mutual vulnerability. The environment would become unstable if states were to conclude that they are free under their own nuclear umbrella. Again, it begs the question of assurance. Even if they have deterrence evidence, it doesn't answer the assurance dissent, the air power dissent, or the trade dissent, which are massively undercovered. They say uniqueness, link controls, and allies have concerns to have a strong presence mitigates them, so they don't believe it will become great. You've also conceded all the planks of the counterplan that increase naval spending and sequestration and increase the number of ships that the Navy have. Also, there's no carrier gap along a 15-4-month carrier gap along would not have effect in the rebounds and focus to Asia. We'll still maintain our commitment to our allies by forward deploying USS Reagan. Reagan has just around upgrades, which demonstrates we're sending one of our most advanced carriers into Japan. We forwardly deployed our most advanced capable list as part of the deliberate effort to put forth in the best to support stability. I already explained my counterplan is able to solve that. They say no impact to Asia proliferation. I already did this in the overview, but more evidence. It will cascade lion in 14. What happens after Japan will have proliferated? Can the proliferation chain be terminated? Telling the Philippines might begin to proliferate since the other U.S. allies or Taiwan might harbor similar worries. Indonesia might, Vietnam might. That was just Asia. The nuclear world is so finally balanced. One states begin to proliferate in one region. They enhance similar states down the nuclear path. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey might fight if newer NATO members were to watch US walk away from Asia. They might as well do it too. They say assurance is low because of nuclear capabilities. It's not contextual to other allies. Also, those assurances are high now. Clevenger 15 modernization for America's nuclear arsenal will be expensive. Pentagon's only to scale back up 35 buys. LRS, IAB, and Ohio replacement SSBN are likely to proceed this. Just the nuclear sector has a stronger growth potential. US will keep all legs of its nuclear triad. They say no because of the Asia pivot. I'll do that here. First is deterrence. First, assurance. Regardless of capabilities, carriers are key to credibility. More evidence. Visibility outweighs Cooper 15. There's critical opportunities to strengthen the position in Asia. Important bases occurring between visibility and vulnerability. Force movements when they're most visible force to reassure allies will determine potential adversaries. And the carrier group can be a strong signal of resolve coercion, such as China's ongoing effects in the ESS and SCS between the gray zones. Gray zones. I need you to finish reading this card, and then because the last argument is carrier's fit, which is the link question, which is above, and I already talked about deterrence as well. So yeah, just finish this card and then read one after it.
Yeah.
540.
Okay. Okay, so you use the phrase like shift a lot on, obviously the first advantage. So I want to just clarify, what shift do you think you're talking about?
One, the first advantage needs a shift to sort of the humanitarian missions that you're discussing. Two, the second advantage needs a shift from sort of understands of conventional deterrence to nuclear deterrence. We don't think either of those shifts will occur.
Okay, why do you think all those swing cards that you read, which are about, an old version of the app where we claim to shift to a mutual denial balance, which is not what we do anymore, why do you think those swing cards at all contextualize to either of the two shifts you just identified?
I think our evidence isn't perfect on sort of the contextual element of the first advantage, but I think it makes entrenched claims that the Navy is committed to carriers, that politicians are committed, that the defense sector is committed, and that the public wants carriers.
So if Navy is committed, obviously I think we all agree.
Which, by the way,
is durable fiat. So you agree the carrier doesn't get to go into Northeast Asia.
Yes, but
Okay.
two important. Hold on. Two important things. One, there are build-up capabilities that were required for your two shift impacts that regardless of the question of durable fiat. And second, our argument, Second, our argument is not just that carriers get redeployed and thus there's no shift. Our argument is that it takes so long for that shift to occur, you can't solve any of your link turns or any of your link defenses.
Okay. So to be clear, I just really want to write this down. You think the two reasons why that implicates it are capabilities and time. And time specifically is all those swing cards that talk about those negotiations.
So you read,
we need to have.
You read a rec of cards that are just like conventional deterrence is bad. Conventional deterrence is bad. Nuclear deterrence is good. If there is a lag between our ability to shift, then allies get freaked out in the very near short interim.
What evidence have you read that we don't have nuclear capabilities to execute a nuclear deterrence strategy? Because newsflash, we do. We have nukes. It's just a question of which we prioritize. So why does time frame at all matter there? The day we announce the carrier is gone, our strategy, the way we would deal with the threats.
No. That begs the question of if we change our capabilities in the region and if allies perceive those capability changes. Your whole argument.
And that's your assurance link also.
You've also got an assurance link that literally said we collapse conventional deterrence. How can you go for these circumvention?
Yeah. Collapsing conventional deterrence is not the same as creating nuclear deterrence. Right?
Okay, yeah, but we
are
only
you don't create effective nuclear deterrence.
I don't think you've actually read a card on that.
Okay, well, I think the card's pretty awesome, though, but I'm going to have to make the shift. Okay, I want to talk about all these internal links to trade based on the carrier. Am I correct? Those are just about the carrier existing. And more importantly, the 11 carriers we have existing, correct?
Two internal links.
It's not about Asia.
No, it actually is about Asia. The Hanlon evidence and the other counterplaying card is about Northeast Asia. Our argument is, one, there is a deterrence and sort of presence question, which is we're key to peacetime presence activities that prevent the sort of disruptions that would occur. Second,
I'm sorry.
Crisis response.
What to trade? I'm talking about this in the context of the trade impact because you've read a bunch of protectionism impacts, which are about like passing protectionist legislation. Just like
No.
you're like literally go into the legislatures of other countries and it's like don't pass
So
protectionist
one, I read
legislation.
3 new cards that are just like trade solves war. 2, protectionism and trade are intimately connected in the sense that if like straits in Northeast Asia were shut down, states would become protectionist. No, it does make sense.
Okay. We'll talk about the motives for protectionism.
I'm gonna cover the currency,
As always.
and then it's the
It's a-
add-on,
In gray zones.
the nuclear deterrence advantage, and then the counter plan.
I read the add-on on politics, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll take a second.
I
540. You did not say conditionality.
I did not.
Yeah, 539.
Wait, so you're finishing the DA, then the add-on, then the counterplan, you said?
Yeah.
then your nuclear deterrence.
Oh, so,
advantage,
Gotcha.
and then
Right,
so
right,
deterrence
yeah.
assurance is at the top though, right? Because you're finishing.
finishing the DA,
Yeah.
add-on, new advantage, counter plan.
Oh,
Got it.
okay,
Totally.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I am taking all the flows.
Yes, I am taking that flow.
Alright.
The one in Arizona, sorry. Do you
Okay.
need the order again? Okay, DA,
DA, got DA.
add-on, which is on politics.
Okay.
Nuclear deterrence advantage,
Yeah.
then the counter plan. I feel like I keep saying nuclear instead of nuclear.
I do that.
Actual, I think both are okay pronunciations.
I know, but I just feel like Bush when I say nuclear.
Sound worse.
Should the document be sent out already?
She has like a 30-second delay.
Oh yeah.
It just
Smart.
says it's
Yeah, the
officially
delay is
sent.
awesome.
We've inflicted that on enough people, dude.
Okay. Everybody? Inquiry zone specifically to the public's visibility is valid because the Dallas Fund of Washington administrative results to the public's and pressure resources must be residents of the region of Pennsylvania, Canadian, Patriot, Fitz, Trade, and also decrease the escalate conflicts with Rhine. Yo, Kasuka carrier collapses assurances, commitment signal to safe peacetime presence and emissions vital to regional U.S. influence on policy and deterrence in case because alternatives are more escalatory, increases crisis instability far sure. In all 11 U.S. naval forces to escalation undermines support the George Washington surge from your Supreme Court carried about the home port and above Front's presence has been a vital presence in one of the core missions. U.S. Navy is important to some 100 influence to defense of global Navy attributes not ready for the influential presence of us all. These engaged in means being they are the persuaded nations to show their dedication less intrusively and medium diplomacy without use and force ability and peacetime distinguishing Navy says unique force and force in the military army cannot be deployment having to portray in the highest level of violence and anxiety flexibility naval purpose logical coloration of the action naval presence supporting U.S. military commitments confirmed to routine basis U.S. political consent to demonstrate the capability of asserting continuing and just in 1 years to deter once by separate crisis management coercion for the action rights and to compensate the most naval roles. These activities of the international development of the Navy operates providing the background of the global engagement principle military of diplomacy presence to mobilize and demonstrate U.S. influence U.S. and interest as a helpful tool to achieve the objective achieve the event to afford deployments to reduce by continual care groups and the Pacific is a prime factor in ensuring regional smoothing shaping the environment conducive to American goals drawing the force to draw attention staying presence and symbolic withdrawal underlies to lead inference with drawing absolutely creating an impression that U.S. is losing interest. Wow, that was long. The rest of it was answered above. The atom. Chinese leadership will never do it. No launch on warning debating their few pre-delegation rank. Enforcing highly service CM on the key also to truly centralized conversation over assets of willingness free. Gain nuclear assets of the Chinese short retaliation, possible compelling reason why China user and applications to and a few of them moving to knowledge of you like in the Danish country and obligation to touch would be unacceptable to Chinese military leadership given the HSCM are moving as a symmetrical constellation patrimony required with coercion and access to launch on warning to lower level officers. Chinese military structures suggestion will be wholly unwilling. No launch on warning for the 15 penalties registered Chinese modernization conditions back to the US and the China's posture remains the same as February 1960 border one change to be higher on the low expressive that and move to the only because of the requires a new attack operation and will not in the specific time in the near future. There are check bearers clocking 15. The Chinese move to the low jump and feel like the requires a civil check operation is not put in place any time near the near future. They will solve it because there are multiple conventional deterrence that exist by absent carriers in Northeast Asia that they don't remove. We all the counterplane also resulted by making it look like China could have a potential to win the counterplane. Or correct counterplane creates mutual enmity between China and the US by making it look like both of them have a strategic advantage against each other, which means that China doesn't feel undercut the nuclear deterrence.
They didn't have a.
Did you kick it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
They don't have a perm on the counterplane, so if we solve
yeah, they don't have a perm on the
that's
counterplane, so if we
advantage.
solve LOW better, then it means that it's an advantage to the counterplane, not to the affirmative. The advantage. The two NC already read that nuclear deterrence fails, which is the large answer to the advantages. You have conceded one of the two only arguments I made to this advantage. It's that your evidence is that the U.S. won't emphasize not that it won't end nuclear deterrence. Giant conventional capabilities nuclear capabilities are certain to solve even if we're not assuring our allies that we have them. And the counterplane's presence solved allied assurances. Those are all things that were really explained on the counterplane. You have no evidence that the plane actually causes a shift to this. The cutoff evidence says that the U.S. budget cuts and sequestration are a reason why Obama is going to start enhancing nuclear deterrence, which means that the status quo is sufficient to solve their advantage, which is why it's from 2013. Now, the counterplan, you have no permutation, which means, back to the advantage.
No, you're good.
No Russian war agreement separate. Russia's not in the U.S. Anybody else wants the U.S. second border. Russia's not champion. The ideology of military person, no consequence of hazard. Relations Europe and also strategic Russian also under control of the relations to the second post is zero possibility. Now, the counterplan, there's no perm, so any solvency is sufficient to vote negative. Don't evaluate the internally set counterplan reverses the impact, which is sufficient also to finish the Hagenbach evidence here. Hagenbach from 15 into China, the Russian directly to be the Russian to the Chinese issue of accomplished negative. Now, the Russian mentioned about not usually important components related to combat productivity purposes involved by second Chinese Russian engagement offensive operations such as aircraft and Russian capabilities ever been security to 18 bubble operational was the rest of Chinese military options PLA confesses that will do support their hardware basis for to minimize the damage to the level spectrum marines and reporting the illustrated locations these complicated Chinese are attracted to survivability. All marked out again at survivability because this card is way too long. They say that we don't solve the which cultures keep solving T2SI, but the turbine but it solves the terminal impacts that counterplane maintains US naval power and credibility, which solves India build up. They say we need to solve the perception of conventional deterrence. The counterplan is the announcement of the counterplan sufficient to solve that will be explained later. The counterplan assures allies that their evidence is about the status quo conventional assurances that fail. The counterplan increases regional assurances, which is sufficient to solve their reading of O'Hanlon is extremely fucked up. We NASB, so this is an offense against the counterplan, and our reading of O'Hanlon is way longer than yours. You've read like 3 lines from it. They say they solve conventional as long as they're in the region. They have no solvency that they do that. That was explained on the case. They say that deterrence, we don't solve deterrence. The Colby evidence, the counterplan announces that nuclear is a strategy which is sufficient to solve. They say we don't solve. We don't say that we only use nukes in the worst case, which means that we don't lead to this evidence. They say that China's washing assets, not capabilities. The counterplan removes assets, which is sufficient to solve because we move them outside of the region. We also decrease the amount of modernization that can happen, which means that the carriers aren't sufficient not to be a threat against China, which is sufficient to solve. Their declaration fails. Evidence takes out the affirmative. Countries don't see the U.S. as sufficient, which means that the announcement fails, and the plan is only perceived as ending a conventional bill. That they say China says no to CBMs are. Hamlin evidence is better on this. They have no evidence about INCSCA, zero feasible, and they work that's the one in CO Hamlin evidence now. Read some more stuff.
Will you do the announcement? I think that card's the best.
Yeah. The announcement solves Ingber 13. Speech and use of high-level policy speeches making a trusted position with the public discourse reviews of passive nature taken by the views of the environment as a whole. Will do for speeches of public media assess a decision of what it also distorts anything that's been in public positions making it clear as thought by one of the most instrumental analysis. Now the counterplane solves their capability arguments of Hamlin server 13 saying the automated enhancement without it undermining I got to say ASB on running critical assets with the home server obvious difficulty mobility commercial one way check capability to enable forcing to teaching limitations effective limits of the limit is not production model the third is a notification made a great for your views with the notation. Mark that notification.
Where is that card?
It's -- solvency -- or * solvency.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, we had 555.
Was that the?
The O'Hanlon 13 card. I'm just gonna send out what I actually read in this dot because it was a bit ambitious.
Oh. Okay. Items starting now. 555.
Sorry, I just wanted to put this on the extra.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's all. Yeah.
Does anyone write down where that mark on the Higginbotham card was. It's not showing up for me, and I think it was at survivability, but
I'm sure you're fine, Marge.
Availability, is that what you meant?
Is the nuclear deterrence advantage, the naval strategy advantage, the counterplan, the politics dissent.
Sorry, you're going way too fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
PI.
Sure.
I'm still looking for my nuclear deterrence. Well,
That's reasonable.
nuclear deterrence, naval strategy.
Yeah. The counterplan, politics, assurance. Is anyone not good? Great. Impacts are not answerability. Decline of U.S. nuclear deterrence makes Asian arms racing inevitable, which turns the only impact of the all the impacts of the outer base were collapse over arms control with Russia inevitable, which causes existential threats. It also makes China escalation inevitable, which collapses assurance because we would lose a war with them, because we would lose a war with them and their allies. One thing we're keeping them safe. We cause a greater emphasis on nuclear deterrence. Our evidence indicates that emphasis is what's necessary to solve assurance. The recent allies are losing confidence in the status quo because Obama's trying to de-emphasize it. The plan leads to a shift because it clearly shifts away from our current strategy strategy for conventional predominance in East Asia. This quote is not solving for there's increasing pressure now, but it's not making Obama shift their evidence indicates there's a degree of reluctance, but that an actual decline of our conventional superiority would be considered insolvent, which means we're impact turning their least out of this, and Russia war is highly probable of arms control collapse. Evidence indicates that it implicates strategic stability and destroys confidence, which means no traditional checks and confidence don't apply. The navy advantage, the impact is dropping. Impact war is highly likely. An impact war is highly likely as long as they nuclearize their navy. The planet necessary to decrease the salience of offensive naval capabilities and make it less and set norms against arms racing. It also acts as a conflict dampener because maritime cooperation, friends, and inhabited capabilities are not the internal link to the advantage based on naval focus. It's also not. There also can't be a time. There's also not time sensitive because it's not based on new acquisitions. Their evidence is answering the wrong advantage. Yes, there's a strategic shift. The location of the carrier is crucial for this question. It has to go to Hawaii. Contain, which means containment is not inevitable. The CSG is the crucial internal link to the China thing. It holds 14. The intercontinental carrier striker is putting about the carrier explains this large part of ASB. Those who believe in the invincibility of the carrier are attempting to fake the name of people them because after putting many of its eggs in one basket. Southeast Asia shift in particular is impossible. They conceded the same no argument that no one would let us station it there, and they've read no evidence that it would be possible to station a carrier in the first place. There's no replacement that's equally threatening because we fiat that offensive strike capabilities, i.e. the ones that are advantage about getting reduced. There's no cause to the advantage that we actually read. These swing cards are about a crisis building internally. We haven't read. We saw proximity because there's nowhere to base it that is near China, which means they don't access these cards. The strategy is not inevitable. They shift because because we're impact turning their we cause a shift. We're impact turning their arguments about inclining potential superiority. All of their cards are about how it takes a long time to shift to mutual denial, which is not our primary link defense argument. These long-term things are not necessary to be able to signal any increase in nuclear assurance, which happens as soon as we decrease our reliance on exclusively conventional fleet shift. Is not necessary to CS21. It just uses the capabilities differently. The politics link says they want to acquire carriers, but we just change what the carrier's role is, which solves nuclear assurance. Happens immediately. The internal link is about what we do with our capabilities for both of the advantages. We don't need to redirect money because it's really causes the focus on the command and see what Navy would be willing to do as long as we cause a shift. The counterplan. No part of this does anything to resolve the advantage. We actually read naval strategy advantage is huge. Just that they ramp up the Navy's focus on conventional warfighting in the Pacific with China through a bunch of asset acquisitions and war plans about the carrier, which means it can't possibly shift the culture and increase the perceived salience of offensive, aggressive naval posturing, which means arms racing becomes inevitable. Second is nuclear deterrence. As I just said, we are impact turning conventional credibility. The more usable our conventional options are, the more scared that China will be of them because they think we're going to try to disarm them, which forces the Navy to use or lose pressures and make escalation inevitable. See the answer not sufficient to solve it empirically. China does not get to work with these kind of diplomatic measures, doesn't trust the U.S., only looks at our capabilities. What's the plan? It's not the counterplan. It's not remove the carrier. The directly countering Chinese aggression is what is destabilizing and it causes use or lose pressures. We need a mutual vulnerability, which the plan causes a shift in Navy advantage is not about power projection, which means increasing buildup doesn't solve it because they want allocated to maritime cooperation. It's the key internal link. There's no announcing it doesn't solve the doesn't cause a perception that we shift to nuclear deterrence. We do nuclear deterrence. There are we have the only evidence specific to nuclear declaratory policy. The plan directly leads to that perception by decreasing the salience of deterrence. It doesn't solve the carrier because China still sees it as crucial if it's located in Japan. The plan is not just declaratory policy to implicit that it is not just declaratory policy. The removal of the carrier signals, which means these arguments only apply to them. Announcement does solvency evidence is not specific to nuclear declaratory policy, which means prefer ours solving capabilities is insufficient to solve. We're saying conventional capabilities are bad. TPP. Protection is inevitable. TPP fails and increases mercantilism in the status quo, which means regardless if you keep open sea lanes, they can't solve a trade. It's not going to be cash. This is the only causal evidence. The Griswold evidence conflates correlation with causation. In fact, war prevents trade rather than the other way around. They misread history, so a bunch of mechanical cards are irrelevant. Trade is irrelevant for Barbary 13. The habits and independence effect where the empirical results spread support for the argument, the academic factors, slow defending influence, that decision, occasion, where the center of the limit of support for perhaps the trade friends, path to be safe enough control for humanity, democracy, alliance, science, and give the evidence guessed in most instances, trade fails to crowd, your independence appears to have little influence on war. The assurance DA, they have only
low, the conceded.
Oh, right, low. Concede China would never do it under any circumstances. Deterrence. Assurance. They fundamentally can't separate them. They consider linchers to nuclear deterrence. That is the only thing that can be credible against China, which means that collective assurance is inevitable because they'll fight a war with us and our allies will freak out independently. We have far more evidence of the distinction between nuclear and nuclear conventional deterrence. And the status quo allies see for nuclear is necessary. It's the most salient for Japan, Australia, and South Korea. Who are the people they say will proliferate? Obviously, it's more logical. And their internal link evidence for yes, relevant impact also says that decreasing the credibility of the nuclear umbrella is the internal link. It's fundamentally inseparable. Nukes are far more important. Page 14. Key allies have been in Asia have been explicit about whether you're not assured about your American defense power. They say credible U.S. nuclear umbrella is indispensable to credible equal deterrence. But at least this prolif, the trade defense on the other flow directly answers their Asia argument. No prolif cascade call for 13. Northeast Asia public cascade of historical equipment cross country found the road difficult due to the majority of reverse cards analysts downplay distance sensitive against use for prolif with its reputation of damage to active cost outweigh benefits and struggle nuclear strategy. The role of their strategy increased over time. Mark that card. Increased over time. Key question is conventional versus nuclear, which explained above. There's no internal link to air power. No evidence that CSG is key to a globally which is what their impact argument is about. Nuclear deterrence is not credible. Now we solve the rejection of mutual vulnerability, which their evidence is talking about, which means their Roberts evidence is just uniqueness for us about how nuclear deterrence doesn't work now. It doesn't say it can never work. Link, it does not control uniqueness. The capital does not solve the nuclear umbrella, which our evidence says is most salient, the most likely thing to trigger allies proliferating in the status quo. Their Link card is about nuclear weapons.
Other carriers solve trade.
Other carriers are submitted to solve trade. We still have the carrier. It does these kind of systemic patrolling missions globally, which is submitted to solve the alls are better and less destabilizing. Nuclear deterrence stabilizing defensive commitments are inevitable. Their evidence is key to yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I gotta get going. Alright. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's going to be. Oh, that's totally fine.
Oh, you were there last?
It's going to be deterrence, politics, counterplan. Yeah.
Politics.
Yep. Counterplan.
Okay.
Then naval strategy, first advantage, and the second advantage.
Was politics between the DA and counterplan? Or dice?
Yeah. Is everyone good? Cool. I know we've been a little jumpy in this, maybe there are a couple massive 1AR mistakes that literally make a game over top level. I will expressly concede their call evidence that says no proliferation. It's about global norms of no proliferation. That was every impact to their second advantage. It was about U.S. and Chinese modernization, U.S.-Russia modernization, which by the way we had impact defense too, they conceded, and general assurances. It also accept any terminal impact to internal insurance. To this said, the only relevant question for your calculus is one, air power, and two, the question of trade. There's seriously just no impact to the affirmative because they read sweeping evidence that there's just no impact to proliferation in East Asia that they cannot get out of. No new 2AR answers. They can't make spinny arguments because I made strategic concessions off of this that we have literally nothing else. It is try or die for the negative because trade collapse makes deterrence failure inevitable. Game over. Now, carriers in the Western Pacific are key to peacetime presence, stable shipping, and crisis de-escalation. It keeps open free navigation and open seas regardless of war. That was the McGrath evidence. I know it was small in the 1NC, but it was definitely there and had no internal link defense, which was new in the 1AR and should be rejected. Now, protectionism is fundamentally distinct. Evans sounded great on it in cross ice, but it was just missing from the 1AR. Our evidence indicates protectionism is distinct, causes tit for tat escalation, and literally extinction level scenario that internally turn your Asians, because you conceded a card that trade turns Asia, in addition to global impacts which are external to the affirmative, and something you can hang your head on, even if East Asia's fucked. Now, even if they're generally like that, other actors are able to solve, and other carrier fleets are able to solve for trade globally. We read a narrowly tailored impact that the PLA will try and shut down straits in East Asia. The only carriers forward deployed in Yoga Sutra, which is the card that Margaret took forever to read in the 1NR, is essential to prevent those closures in the first place. There's basically no internal leak defense, definitely not carded, and their best hope is generic trade defense, which doesn't apply because it's broadly about protectionism. Now, the second impact was air power. Carriers are key to it. Their general argument that other carriers are able to fill in again begs the question of, is East Asia key? We have the only evidence in terms of McGrath and the counterplan that says it definitively is. You should also note that if they win, that air power is not going to collapse. It is a global conflict dampener, and trade is also the only impact because they've double dropped the air power solves for Chinese aggression, extension, Russia war, and any possible scenario beside of trade. Again, trade only external impact. Line by line. You should frame all these things through a question of trade, which they have pretty much no internal link defense to. Top level, even if they're generally right about nuclear versus conventional deterrence, you can see the specific link work done on carriers. Allies love the visibility and vulnerability. They want to have things that can be struck to cause it. Also, their Chinese gray zone arguments is important. The Casper evidence establishes that it's necessary for assurance. Our forward evidence indicates Yogu Sutra forward deployment is necessary for things like trade in this instance. Also, all of this is irrelevant and there's no impact to it if there's no impact to proliferation. So I'm actually not even going to read these additional cards. They say no East Asian proliferation. Again, I'll expressly concede it. It's another card that proves this thing. They say that we don't solve for things like nuclear umbrella assurances or high now. Link controls the direction of uniqueness for all of these questions because security assurances and U.S. presence is important. Case, or politics, it's a trade shit. Top-level trade definitively solves war. Griswold evidence is a case study from 1816 to 2000. It's better longitudinally, even if it has some problems with correlation versus causation. Your evidence does as well. Your evidence is also bad in the sense that listings like democracy and institutions as solving for things in addition to trade, but those variables are not covariated or disaggregated in the sense that trade is important for democracies and institutional ties in the first place. That was our argument. We read two cards, including one that was like 4 pages, articulating the empirical trend. World War II definitively spins negative in this context. Smoot-Hawley tariff act collapse the global economy and triggered escalation, allowed scapegoating. It creates both the means and the motive. They've also conceded a framing point that even if we don't win it, prevents all wars. It's a conflict dampener, so even if they have some breakout scenarios to some impact that I'm not great on, it still triggers impact. Counterplay. Announcement plate definitively solves for the second advantage. The first for 2 framing points. First, all of their answers all of their announcement fails arguments amendments take out the affirmative justice law because countries don't see the plan's effectiveness. It bolsters all of our no-shift arguments, so they only would know via announcement, but they've said that's not credible. Now, we still think it is credible. Now, second point, allies don't want nuclear or conventional deterrence. They want both, which is what the counterplan fiats that the U.S. announces and assures both these in the first place. That's their own evidence, which they read more of in the 1AR. It says both of them are key, and there's no terminal impact to these things being banned. Now, the announcements definitively solve our Ingberg evidence isn't perfectly specific about presidential war power. Second is the counterplan limits some capabilities, which is sufficient to solve. Now, they've also missed the entire trick of the counterplan. I'm not going for this as it solves your internal links, which you're right, was about your old affirmative. I'm going for this, it solves the impacts to China and modernization and escalation. It has a litany of confidence-building measures, which are a step in the right direction. Their evidence is too generic. Our Hanlon evidence is vastly superior and proves that it's moving in the right direction. All the solvency defense was about internal links, not the terminal impacts. It's functionally an advantage counterplan that has strategic assurances and then trades our independent impact.
You can say this too.
What's that?
It's all CS21.
Oh, it also CS21. It limits U.S. modernization with the last plank and it shifts it to more defensive, active denial strategy. That should be sufficient to solve the perception of U.S. modernization. Sufficiency framing was conceded, so we only need to solve one of the two internal links to solve the signal. Additionally, it solves the terminal impact and the thesis of deterrence and assurance, which doesn't have an impact. They have no evidence about the plan causing the shift in the first place. I'm actually going to do the second advantage and then the first advantage. They can see no impact to Russian war. Our grand evidence indicates that it won't escalate, so it's further thing. Our evidence indicates there's too many ties to preserve it. They have these turns the dissent arguments about arms racing, but that's irrelevant if we win the fundamental thesis of no prologue. Like the strat stuff. The only argument I'm going for is no strategy shift. Our comfort evidence and sense evidence isn't perfect to the affirmative, but it indicates that these carrier presence are entrenched in society. Shipbuilders, politicians, and literally everyone else is committed to the current purposes. Yes, I understand that they still use carriers, but with different explanations, but the conceded re-highlighting of their own evidence indicates there's critics that oppose the plan, which proves no shift overall. Trade. It's independent. They don't have a prolif impact. They don't have an East Asia impact.
What are we at?
332.
332. Okay, yeah. Can you keep doing this? Yes. I went that first.
Yes.
Obviously. Okay. The order is naval strategy, nuclear deterrence, the counter plan, TPP, which is I guess we're kind of going to do some of the impact debating about trade. I mean, if you flowed that elsewhere, you could put basically on TPP. I'm just going to be doing some stuff about trade, and then the deterrence or deterrence DA. Okay, anyone not ready? It's tried for the affirmative. You can see the Indo-Pakistan naval arms are never caused nuclear warfare between the two. It's a conceded impact, which means only we have a chance of solving because they have zero defenses claimed. The 1 and 0 Covenant 7 indicates that India-Pakistan arms racing are highly likely to, especially naval arms racing specifically, so it doesn't have to be nuclear, it's highly likely to escalate to nuclear war. They already have nuclear weapons and they have a unstable deterrent relationship, and there's high tension in Sasco, which means it's highly likely only the signal of restraint from the plan by removing the carrier allows the United States to send the signal to other nations to decrease naval arms race. Rubel Evans is the only card that talks about this and says specifically removing the carrier and removing our heavy forward offensive presence in Northeast Asia is key to give us the moral high ground to the nations who stop naval arms races, which is a critical control. The counterplay doubles down on naval dominance and naval arms races, which means it makes this impact worse, which means this is at the very least a disadvantage to the counterplay. We also independently do call CS21 cultural shift because our Adam 7 indicates that it is only being inhibited right now because of the heavy naval conventional presence in the Asia Pacific. The plan by removing the vast majority of our large-scale naval assets would force them to change it because it takes away that mission for them to focus on. But even if we don't win, that there's a culture shift, removing the carrier alone, then the signal of restraint of the plane is still enough to solve more arms racing. That's a rule of 100% conceded. Impact now the nuclear deterrence.
Navy is a shock absorber.
And Navy is a shock absorber. They can see that independent argument that effective Navy and decrease in naval arms race defense conflicts from escalate, which controls there is impact. That's the rule of the nuclear deterrence. Is that, oh my God, there are so many impacts on this advantage that you really haven't answered at any point in the debate. The Asian control, if you consider Leah Evans indicates continued focus on conventional deterrence in the context of Asia makes Asia arms races and nuclear warfare inevitable, not just because of proliferation arms indicates there are tons of hotspots, for example, the South China Sea, the East China Sea, places like Taiwan, etc., and territory disputes that all could escalate. Our evidence indicates that conventional deterrence is not well suited for that area because of things like large maritime distances and the fact that it is not overwhelming enough that only nuclear can solve it. You can see our evidence indicate, which indicates that Asia is a large hotspot that involves many nuclear powers, which means a war that was escalated that we're not able to effectively deter would definitely escalate and go to extinction, and it would definitely also inhibit Asian trade as well. Second, that Russia interlinked their only defense here is literally 3 seconds of extending a card from 2007. You can see our Hobart Evans indicates that Chinese modernization will cause Russia to backtrack on start, which none of your defense assumes. Obviously, our Hobart Evans indicates once they backtrack on start, it's game over. It increases tensions, makes it impossible for us to have things like communication or any de-escalation of conflict. Or Barnett Evans also opposes your defense and says U.S.-Russia war is pretty big impact because we have a lot of nuclear arsenals and we have historical attacks, especially because of things like Ukraine that provides uniqueness, which means a collapse of start would certainly cause war there. Now be careful.
The call makes no reference to
And the call, the call of the call is only about new proliferators. It's very important. It's about breakup capacity. It's not talking about horizontal proliferation or I forget which one's which, but it's not about vertical proliferation within China and Russia, which we have definitely not read any defense to now. The counterplan, it does not solve any of the after, and I think he kind of admits this. First, nuclear deterrence, it definitely does not solve. One, our Adam 7 indicates that heavy conventional naval presence in the region decreases the salience of nuclear weapons, which means that both our allies and our adversaries don't actually think we would use it, which means even if you just declare to say, oh yes we will, if you also invest a bunch in the carrier, then nobody's going to think that's credible, and we would always default to the conventional option. Second is our Colby Evans further supports the argument if we have a ton of conventional capabilities and people think we will always choose those, which means it destroys the deterrent capability. You have to remove the forces. The declaratory policy of the solvency deficit takes out your conflict, but not the app. The Polygon says just words do nothing, but if we remove the conventional forces, it forces Obama to change the deterrence policy, and obviously people will perceive that. People would perceive that once we don't have the carrier there because that would be our official policy. That is the Medkev counterplan. Now, they additionally do not solve for naval arms racing. The internal link to that has always been argument based on how we need to shift away from conventional both to prevent arms racing, the perception of naval arms racing, and because we have to change culture. The counterplan increases our naval capabilities in the region, which means that obviously it's not able to solve that. It makes all that worse. Even they also are not able to solve China's modernization because that is a response specifically to conventional capabilities, which the counterplan doubles down on arms indicates that conventional capabilities cause China to modernize more. That's Hackenbotham and Blog because they think it threatens their second strike capability, which means the counterplan only increases the risk of arms racing. Now, TPP at the top, they can see protectionism as a level. No, this is literally conceded. We automatically win this globally and East Asia in particular. The one sees that protectionism happens if TPP doesn't pass, and the two sees that protectionism or mercantilism increase. It does. Policing sea lanes is insufficient if every single country increases terrorist counter. Extended is pretty long in the 1AR, and they just dropped it. That means there's no uniqueness for their Asia trade effects, client trade foes, or anyone else. So trade cannot possibly act as a conflict therefore. It means this tried for U.S. nuclear turns to stabilize regions to better tolling anyway because it cuts a capital conflict escalation. They can see the slew of nuclear deterrents are sufficient to solve conflict escalation apart from the 1A. See, they indicate that because of its high salience and large magnitude, it will never cause war, which means disable prevents escalation, which means we can take their impact. Now, trade does not solve war prevents trade. There tries to causation, but only correlation. Our cash evidence says a rigorous causal analysis says correlation is explained by causality going the opposite direction. That means the world will be more peaceful and cause the increase in trade. The Griswold evidence is about statistical causal analysis is better than speculating. And all the analysis Tyler gives maybe sounds good, but it's not in their Griswold evidence, which is just like a Cato Institute. Protectionism is not a distinct impact. That's silly. Protectionism is just client trade foes, which means that if there's a causal relationship between trade and war, we should have observed protectionism causing war in the past. Now, for both this impact and the air power impact, conventional deterrence answers it. Their whole argument about why conventional presence is good, we from the entire debate, why the conventional presence is escalatory, especially with nations like China and East Asia, because they think that the threshold for use is too low. They think it threatens survivability of the nuclear deterrent, which means that doubling down on things like air power would only make that worse. We've read, we're the only ones with having something macro level question about nuclear versus conventional. Second is that the cure is inevitable. They're internally to both air power and trade. It's literally about the existence of carriers. They do not have a reason why the plane gets rid of them. We have 11. We just ruled in Northeast Asia. We're the only ones with evidence about nuclear conventional deterrence in Northeast Asia about the plan. That's right. Good debate.
good debate. How about Nick? So ultimately, I felt like there were I felt like while you were better on the India-Pakistan impact explanation of the tour, I didn't feel like you were as good on the delineating. Yeah, I mean, you kept throwing out like doubling down and freaking out, but not as much in comparison versus what the counterplan did in terms of resolving aspects of some of the reasons that they would get freaked out. And I mean, never really mentioned the increases of the different naval strategies as well as the filling in the budget, which they were quick to highlight was an ongoing portion of your evidence when it comes to naval strategy. So I give them a pretty large risk of solving that advantage. In terms of the second advantage, ultimately conclude also that I don't think there is enough in the 2AR to delineate between do both as opposed to do a single one, and I think that there's not enough in the evidence you're referencing to say why the commitment heavily to both. Like, I think it's good kind of like in a nutshell talking about why conventional deterrence is bad in and of itself and can potentially trade off, but when there are large instances of both, and I also just feel like the speech making solvency argument wasn't addressed very much on the face in the 2NR also, that gives those type of assurances in order to lessen the solvency deficit there. One thing that I think would have really helped for the 2AR is if you had focused in on one impact or one solvency deficit and impacted that substantially, as opposed to kind of peppering and being like, oh yeah, that and potentially that and potentially that. And I think inevitably it left me scrambling to try and reconcile how they were solvency deficits as opposed to saying, well, the solvency deficit is logical. I think in terms of the nuclear deterrence advantage, had you spent a group of time in the 2AR, matched to the 1AR, why like a little bit more why both doesn't solve and really kind of did something similar to that you did on the protectionism debate on the dissad in terms of comparing evidence, or at least, I guess not necessarily comparing evidence because I don't think you were as good as that on the protectionism debate, but at least developing your credible warrant and giving an umbrella argument to why it can't be accessed. So substantiating more the solvency deficit aspect as opposed to the small conflicts that were retained after the ProLift thing. It never seemed like there was a clear strategy in the 2NR after ProLift was kind of taken out of the equation, other than the Indo-Pac advantage. So I think that it solves the majority of that. I think there ends up being a mitigated but a small risk of the trade net benefit as well as the air power net benefit. The air power net benefit wasn't impacted very well in the 2NR. And I do think that you went some defense in terms of I don't have, like, you were quick to reference, like, I think the 1AR did a lot of work on this protectionism inevitable argument. I didn't have that as much in the 1AR. Like I did have the argument that I did give you some good defensive credit for.
Sorry, just to be clear, do you not have it at all, or just not to the same extent?
I have like 3 words, like protect, and it's basically, I just did not have a substantial portion of it. But even if I reconcile that was the case, I still think that there was sufficient net benefit in terms of air power and that to look negative, because I don't think that there's a credible solvency deficit to account.
Yeah, so I guess my question I want to take it by advantage. So first, naval strategy. I guess just from the 1AC, the premise of the advantage is that naval arms races and heavy naval forward presence is bad and causes arms races. So I guess just like at the end of the debate, why do you think the conference solves that?
I think it's a reconfiguration of strategy. it's like your evidence outlines like that it's heavily carrier dependent, and the counterclaim is a shift from being carrier dependent to an overall bolstering of the Navy to be able to send a signal that the U.S. Navy can be relied on.
But and so I guess this is I didn't explain internally enough, because I guess I would see that anything that bolsters the Navy and says it can be relied on, like disadvantages the impact.
See the way that I understood.
But I didn't.
The way that I understood the advantage is that people get pissed off at the carrier aspect of it, and then no longer want to depend, or then get annoyed with the overall Army. And I understood it as the restructuring would give the world more assurances, and the shift in strategy in terms of what the carriers would do would ease those tensions.
For CS20, for the naval strategy advantage.
Right.
Okay.
The shift in strategy and what they do is you mean just to be less like aggressive or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And then I guess just the second thing is just nuclear deterrence. I do understand that the counterplan, inherently it has intuitive appeal, but just like you talked about evidence comparison, like they don't have a card for that, and we have they do have one card that talks about speeches. That is true.
You're right,
but
which isn't specific. I agree. But when in these whole cross-ex dialogues that were going on about what the shift in strategy was, in terms of being conventional and nuclear, I see like when the United States gives increased conventional deterrence and increases their conventional forward presence, that people are like, oh, well, this is a signal that they're not really committing their nukes. And I think intuitively, if you say we will also commit our nukes, and this is something that locks in terms of foreign policy, I think that you needed something to tell me why that's uniquely not true, or why that would be seen as bad faith.
Okay.
I just don't have
Is that not
direct
true if the
recollection.
nuclear declaratory policy card?
Which piece of evidence?
That was it's 2009. I can I'll find the site. It was a policy. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, because that was the only reason we made a thing out of the specificity argument.
No, I understand that. Without how you, I think I have it wrong.
Policy. Yeah, it should be.
POLL.
Yeah.
How do you feel about